Welcome to Matters of DeCorum. I'm Scott Corum. This is what matters to me. I have a lot of friends on Facebook, and people have looked me up in social media because of my involvement in a documentary called The Dungeon Masters. And one thing I get asked a lot is, how did I get involved in the Dungeon Masters, and what was filming that like? So I thought I would take some time to address that tonight and tell a little bit of story about how I became to be involved in the documentary and what it was like going through the process, some of the things that happened afterwards. Now, a little side note before I get into this. There's a gag, a little bit of visual humor that a lot of internet personalities do, whether they're reviewing movies or what have you, and that is when something is painful, something is so bad or so stupid that it's just painful to view or to review, they'll pick up a bottle of liquor and just upend it and drink away the pain. Sort of a throwback to the days of the Old West where heavy spirits and liquor was used as an anesthetic. It kills the pain, and the bigger the bottle or the more alcoholic the drink supposedly is, the more the thing that they're reviewing must hurt. It's a good bit. It's got all that cultural context, and it fills in a lot of the emotive content of what they're doing. It's a bit that I've chosen not to emulate. I'm just don't feel like the random sudden consumption of a huge amount of alcohol is a appropriate medium for me to convey a point, even in jest. That being said, this is a very good sipping Scotch. And I'm not using it so much to kill the pain, although there is some of that involved in this process. But it is easing along some of the memories. I like a good Scotch. And you will not see me drinking something like this in my videos very often, if ever again. But for this one, just a bit. The Dungeon Masters was filmed in 2006 and 2007. The process might even have begun as early as 2005. And that was not an easy time in my life. Far from it. There were a lot of things going wrong. And a lot of things that simply hadn't gone right when they were supposed to. So, this is not necessarily a happy time, but I'm kind of glad that this is when that little snapshot of my life was taken. As we are best measured not by how well we do when everything is going well, but how well we do in adversity. I was running games for a small convention out by Anaheim called Games University. A couple of friends of mine were running the role-playing department of Games U that year, and had asked me if I'd be interested in being involved. I went and ran a couple of Mutants and Masterminds games because, well, at the time I was really into first edition Mutants and Masterminds. I was running a lot of con games at Strategicon, and okay, that seemed like a good idea. While I was setting up for my game, the producers of the Dungeon Masters approached my friends and asked if there was somebody interesting running games. And my friends took me up. I told them all about me, Scott Corum, down in this room, running this game. So, the producer and director came in and asked if they could film the game just to see if it was okay for, if we were documentary material, if it was an interesting and fun experience. And at that moment, this table full of players I had never met before, but who I was dedicated to run a 4-hour game for, turned into massive dicks. Across the board, all of them. Oh, you're filming a role-playing documentary? Hail Satan! And it went downhill from there. I ran them a very good game. Maps and moving things around and rolling and jumping up and shouting. And of course, every critical success on the table was met by, 20, thank you, Prince of Darkness! To the point where I rarely tell a table full of gamers, y'all are dicks, but it's how the game had to end because, well, they were. I thought that was the end of it because I had a table full of dicks. And I got a call from the director a couple of days later asking if I'd be interested in being interviewed for perhaps more involvement in the documentary. I went through a month of him coming over to my house every so often, setting up a camera, and just talking, interviewing. And I learned long ago that self-revelation is good for the soul. It's good for mental health. It's good for all sorts of things. So I didn't really have a problem opening up a little bit, talking about what I had gone through in my gaming career, my personal career, what it was like growing up, and bullying that I'd undergone while I was in school. And it was difficult material to cover, but it was good for me. And after 4 or 5 sessions of that, it feels like 4 or 5. It could have been 2 or 3. Director Kevin McAllister called me and said the producers would definitely like you to be part of this documentary. Let's see what we can do to move this forward. There was paperwork and things to sign, permission to film around this building, which was like pulling teeth because my wife's not only manages the apartment with me, but she's the office manager for the company that owns the building. And her boss was a little reluctant to let too much filming going on around here. He didn't know what kind of stuff was going to go on or how his building and property was going to be represented. So it's kind of understandable. But filming happened. Quite a bit of it. Over the space of the next year or so, 2006, 2007, it wasn't like they lived here for a year. One morning they came over super early. Anna woke up to let them in, and so they could film me waking up and going through my morning routine and stuff. They followed me to events that I went to, things that the Wednesday night game that I played, and things like that, and basically just following along, getting an idea of what it was I do. And it caught me writing the novel that I'd started to write. And there's the novel. I'd started writing with A Single Wish Forever well before the documentary ever started. I was about a year into writing it by the time we started filming. But it was after we started filming, that the process of getting my agent happened. Now, I met Denise Dumars through a mutual friend, my friend Mandy, saw her in the documentary, and we agreed to work together. And the idea for Uncle Drac came about in the middle of the documentary, but as soon as I found out what it was going to take to put together my own cable TV show, they grabbed onto that, and okay, let's film you doing that. And it was every idea that I had for 6 months a year had someone there following along. Pulled out a whole bunch of my old art papers, some of which still haven't gotten put away yet, by the way, and went through pictures and stuff. Talked about old characters. Talked about Mark Duquesne, who was then subsequently a few years later used as source material in the television show Community. That was fun. But it was a year of me trying very hard to get ahead in anything and everything, all the major moments that I was trying to get things done, having a camera there, which worked and it didn't. There were quite a few times that things happened organically in real life, and I was ready to move on. But no, we had to reset and take that shot again. Can we try that one more time just to make sure? The light, the action. Kevin was great to work with as a director, but there were multiple takes of a large number of important events in my life. That that hasn't been an entirely bad thing, I suppose. Sometimes it's useful to develop the knack for faking spontaneity. I know you've had it in your manuscript 3 times and walked all the way up the staircase and all the way to the end and all the way back. Could you do it one more time? Okay, one more time, and this time could you sound a little bit more desperate? So things got set up to occur. The puppet show I did, I'd been out of the puppet ministry for years. I wasn't even with a church when we were filming this documentary. But the puppetry and Captain Scripture were things that had been a very large part of my life. So Kevin arranged for a wonderful church to host us, and I wrote them a script, and based on the lessons they were going to have the day we were there. And Anna and Mandy got on either side of me with puppets, and we did a show. I really enjoyed that too. I hadn't had a chance to get back to doing Captain Scripture or any kind of puppetry, which I would like to get back into. Which is one reason why when we actually got around to, you saw me scripting out and storyboarding and getting ready to film Uncle Drac. Uncle Drac was a really good experience. I have since lost my status as a producer at Torrent City Cable. You have to go to classes and produce a certain amount of material, and it just couldn't happen. You have to schedule your time and arrange to rent the equipment out at exactly. It doesn't cost anything if you're a producer, if you've gone through all the classes. But if you haven't gone for a while, then you've got to set aside 6-8 weeks, 10, 12 to take the necessary classes all over again and recertify. And I don't have time for that. I haven't for quite some time. I got flown to Gen Con in 2007, and that was a good experience. The first time I'd ever been, really. That's where I actually met Elizabeth Reisman and Richard Meeks. Elizabeth was in the makeup. I only ever saw her in the makeup there, and we had a wonderful afternoon of being filmed not meeting each other. It's a scene that didn't make it into the documentary, but it was a really wonderful timed moment where I'd walk past and she'd walk past and just missed meeting me, and the point that even though these people are all in the documentary and you'd expect all of them to show up at some point in time or at a table, that just wasn't going to happen because life happens and life is life. Um, when I met Richard Meeks, he was having a really difficult. This was just after the implosion of his group that you saw in the documentary, and he was just trying to cope. Um, so I didn't meet him at his best. I am friends with both Elizabeth and Richard on Facebook. We've chatted, we've talked. Richard's come out to California. We've had dinner together. He's a fun guy to spend time with. I've met him at Gen Con since. I've been a time or two since the Dungeon Masters. And great guy. Elizabeth, I believe I have a standing invitation to party and hang out if I ever get to the East Coast, which I probably will at some point in time. Two very real, very honest, very good people. Elizabeth doesn't think she came off very well in the documentary, and I can understand her seeing that. I have to admit that they nailed me. That's me on screen. So the Uncle Drac production took a lot out of me. It took more out of me than I thought it would. I went to the hospital after we filmed the ninja fighting sequence because there was a lot of additional drama that you might have been able to see on the screen that just didn't need to be there. That and I hadn't had my slipped discs diagnosed at that point in time, but they were still there. They were having their effect. That was painful. But you suffer for good art, and I'll stand by. It's not the best comedy fight choreography I've ever seen, and I did borrow yakety sax, but fair usage. It was a cable show. Didn't make any profit off of it. And doing the editing and the animation and all the artwork to go around the footage that was filmed, I had a little breakdown. It was one of my breakdowns, but I got past it. I had to take an extra week every so often, but that was done. And by that time, I had completed a draft of my book and had it reviewed by Denise, and completed revisions a couple of times, and the book was in and was ready to be shopped out. Then came one of the worst nights of my life, and the cameras were right there, right in the office. Because, and again, this is something, if you've seen the Dungeon Masters, you know exactly what I'm talking about, most likely. On the night that Uncle Drac's Magical Clubhouse was to premiere on Torrent City Cable, actually, before that, it was the first time I'd finished it and the first time anyone was going to see it, so all the people involved came over for a big viewing party, and we were going to watch it and really enjoy it, and that was going to be my triumph. That was okay, I've finally finished creating something, and here it is, we can enjoy it. And like an hour before people showed up, I got the phone call that my agent did not like my book, that she hated it, and did not want to represent it. I will not go into the reasons that happened. It was, let's call it a misunderstanding of gargantuan proportions. It was still, at the time, in the moment, for that night, pretty devastating. It changed what I was going to be able to accomplish as a writer, as a producer. It flavored my future existence as a creative individual. Didn't end it by any stretch of the imagination. Changed it. There wasn't a lot to be filmed when the Dungeon Masters passed that. There was one night when I was at Gen Con in 2007. It was one of the most interesting nights of my life. You'd think Gen Con happens in Indianapolis and everyone in the city's got to know about it because it's this huge thing. And, well, if you're not in the gaming community, it's not. If you're not a mainstream, D&D is still, it's in the mainstream. It's working its way in. It's more mainstream right now, but there was a night where I walked around Indianapolis dressed as Uncle Drac. There were some very good shots got that night because Kevin had this amazing knack, absolutely amazing, for finding framing in the environment. The manhole covers with steam pouring out of them, and incidents of lighting and stairs and steps, and that shot at the end with the building lit up like the American flag. That was right there, and that was incredible to walk around. That was a lot of walking. I got tired and very sore because those boots were not comfortable by any stretch of the imagination, not even a little bit. And not only were the boots just not comfortable, but when you're walking around the middle of a major metropolitan area in a cape, a Russian greatcoat, and pirate boots, people form very quick opinions about you, about your sanity, perhaps even your sexuality. And many of these people, late at night, over the weekend, will have been imbibing, perhaps more than I have been during this video, and will loudly share those suddenly generated opinions with you. I got yelled at by Indianapolis. Some of it was pretty funny. Some of it, I couldn't run in those boots. The temptation was there, and I don't think Kevin had that much of a plan to back me up if anything happened. I'm sure he would have been right in there, but that was an interesting night. Finally, the everything that needed to be filmed was filmed, and even after that, there were still scenes that Kevin wanted to get. Could we come back and film one more scene at the apartment building? Well, no. The permissions had lapsed, and Anna's employer was not about to sign off on any more, so some faking got done. The me breaking a dice with a hammer scene is filmed outside in front of the building for that reason, and not some type of place inside. A few bits and pieces. I learned a lot about getting good sound, about cinematography, and when a piece of equipment or two broke down on him, if it was still usable, Kevin didn't mind letting me use it for a while. I still have a pretty good, mostly intact tripod that he loaned me and hasn't asked for back. So it was a educational, very educational experience for me. Not only going through the process of learning to be a cable television producer at Torrent City Cable, but watching the process of making the documentary. That was worth its weight in gold. Time passed. I didn't think about things much. I had things to get on with, and the novel to feel crushed about. And my friend Vic and I started writing the role-playing games at that point in time. which was good. It was a good release from what had been going on. Then Kevin calls me and says, we've got a cut of it done, and we'd like you to see it so that you can make sure that you were fairly represented, which was really nice of him. I get the feeling he didn't have to do that, but he did. He wanted to make sure. So I went to the offices where he had his production company. Incidentally, the right over the production offices for Tim and Eric, for doing Tim and Eric's Good Awesome Show. Great job at the time. And I saw the cut, and it was the weirdest thing I've ever done. Is the second weirdest. We'll get to the first. Was watching me on that screen in his office being me like that through someone else's eyes entirely. But it was me. I mean, they got me. Fair and clear. That was me on that screen. My only concern was I was worried how Anna would feel about how she came off of the documentary. Because her manner seemed to be extremely derisive, and there were other things. I just wanted to make sure that she was good with it. So he had us both come back, and we both watched it. Anna and me watched it in the office again, and Anna didn't have a problem with it. There were no changes based on Anna's opinion of her presentation in the movie, which if there had been a problem, I'm pretty sure he would have done something in editing. That was the point that they were at. But no, that's the representations you see of my wife and I in that film are the ones that we agreed to across the board. Documentary came out. Watched it on DVD with some friends. I got a few DVDs of it. I think I still have one around someplace. The extras on the DVD, which a number of people might not have seen. If you've seen it online, like on Hulu Plus, you may have missed some of the extras. Scenes taken out, me using a pair of really big pixie sticks and towels as nunchucks, or talking about my vasectomy or injuries to my nether regions. The tomb of Corum's magnetic groin, and return to the tomb of Corum's magnetic groin. Those two segments, as I recall. So if you can hunt up the DVD or the DVD extras, it's worth a watch. There's also a lot of material, interviews with people who were considered but were not included in the documentary. Things like that. Some friends of mine who revealed a lot about themselves. And rather well, too. And that was it for the most part. There was one more event, which is by and far the strangest thing that's ever happened to me in my life. They were going to screen the documentary at the IFC International Film Channel's event at a theater in Manhattan. And they flew me out and put me up in Manhattan for a night, and I attended this premiere. If I thought it was weird watching myself on a big screen TV in an office with the director and my wife, that was nothing compared to seeing this thing up on a movie screen in front of hundreds of people, listening to their reactions and hearing what they had to say about it. And they didn't know I was there. I was in a back corner, just watching, observing. It was humbling and humiliating and exhilarating, and I got introduced at the end of it. All the way from Torrance, California, the heart and soul of the Dungeon Master Scott Corum. I used to do theater. Elementary school, junior high, high school, college. I used to do theater. I've been on stage. Amateur theater in the meantime, in between all the educational stuff I did. Got an award in my high school for dramatic excellence, being in every play that had been in an educational institution I had been in from 6th grade through graduating high school. So I've been on a stage in front of people who were applauding before. It's not a new experience for me, but this wasn't like any of that had ever been before. Because they were actually applauding me. And there were some questions asked, but the one that always sticks with me was, what's it like? What's it like sitting here in this theater watching that happen? It was like a full day at Disneyland compressed down into an hour and a half, and 5 seconds of being in a horrific car crash stretched out to an hour and a half, all at the same time. I spent a little while tracking reviews of the Dungeon Masters. Positive, negative, averaged out to about even, I really think, when it comes down to it. A lot of people didn't seem to really understand it. Not sure I do entirely myself. I've talked to the director. I know what he was trying to do with it. And it wasn't a documentary about Dungeons and Dragons. It wasn't a documentary about role-playing games, really, even though that is me narrating most of it. And that narration mostly came from those interviews that I did. Nothing that, there was no time in front of a mic doing dedicated narration. It was all just from conversational stuff. And it wasn't about the gaming, which is what I think a lot of the reviewers really were upset by, because they were watching a documentary called The Dungeon Masters, and it talks about D&D, and there's dice in the eyes of the drow elf girl's head on the cover. Worst cover art ever. But it was about the people who are the Dungeon Masters. It was about 3 individuals in society with their own flaws and strengths, and what their existence was like. It was framed around the hobby of gaming and playing Dungeons and Dragons and Mutants and Masterminds. The Mutants and Masterminds game that I'm running in that game, or in the documentary, oh God, hilarious. Never haven't laughed that hard in a long time. And a good game should be so funny that everyone spit milk out their nose at least once, even if they're not drinking milk. And for a documentary about the people, I'm not still 100% sure what Richard thinks of how he was presented in it. I know Elizabeth didn't think she was presented fairly at all, and I can understand that. Me? That's me. That is me on that screen doing me stuff, being me, during a really hard time. People will occasionally still make comments on the movies or on my videos on YouTube or what have you, as though the events in that documentary happened yesterday. Which I can understand. You know, viewing something like that, it brings it to there's an immediacy to it. I've just experienced that, therefore that must be something that everyone has just experienced. Stopped filming in 2007. It's 2015. It's been 8 years. I've written over 200 gaming products. My novel eventually got published at Drive-Thru Fiction. I really should put it up on Amazon at some point in time. When all is said and done, I've had a good few years of doing better than I was doing in the documentary. Things aren't perfect, but I think I can thank my experiences with the Dungeon Masters for helping me to frame what my problems were, what I needed to work on, where I needed to go, and giving me a very broad set of experiences I might not have had otherwise. If you've never been to New York, Manhattan in particular, I'd go. It's expensive, but, one night stay. Walk around. You don't walk in Los Angeles. You really don't. Everything's kind of spread out, and you've got a banking district and a clothing district, and you might walk a district in Los Angeles, but you don't walk the city. But walking in Manhattan was amazing because everything that I could want was every block. There was food and clothes and pharmaceuticals and everything was there on every block. Every building could take care of itself and did. And just the astonishing variety of things to look at and businesses and people. I went in the winter. It was cold as hell, and it was a good walk. After the showing, we went to a bar that the IFC premieres always go to, and they'd made a drink called the Dungeon Master. I don't even remember what was in it. It was delicious. It was all coffee and Baileys and rum, and I talked to people about myself and about things that their experience with the gaming, and I couldn't buy one of those drinks for myself all night. It just kept on getting put in my hand. I don't remember how I got back to where I was sleeping that night, but I did. If you have not seen the Dungeon Masters and have an interest in seeing it, like I said, you can find it on Hulu Plus, I believe. If you are interested in the novel that I was writing at the time that the Dungeon Masters was being filmed, that I'll put a link below this video, both on YouTube and at WordPress. And thank you for your interest. If you would just like to chat and or say hi, you can find me on Facebook. And feel free. I can never have enough friends, acquaintances, or people that I know. That's a treasure, no matter what you're talking about. If you liked this video, I would encourage you to like it, perhaps favorite it, subscribe to my feed. I try and do one of these a week, and there's some fairly interesting things coming up in the next few weeks. It's October, and I'm probably going to try and take advantage of the fact that it is Halloween. It might well be time for Uncle Drac to make a comeback, and it may be time for him to enter politics. That should be fun. If you really dug this video and would like to see a higher quality of things happening in the future, I would like to encourage you to visit my Patreon page at www.patreon.com/ScottCorum and consider becoming a donator. Every little bit helps, and everything that I get helps me to produce videos, write gaming material, and generally be as creative an individual as I can manage. I did not go through a lot of this, and that's probably for the best. It is a very good Scotch. It is a sipping Scotch, and I would really prefer to savor it. This particular Scotch and the glasses that I'm drinking it out of, which are awesome, are a gift from my personal assistant, Devin. Thank you. And they are meant to last. Like I said, I'm not going to do this very often. Tonight, though, special occasion. I don't revisit this time in my life often. This time, totally worth it. So, for now, I'm Scott Corum. This is what has mattered to me, and I will talk to you next time on the next Matters of DeCorum. Scotchy, Scotchy, Scotch. I like Scotch. You know, if Marvel can put a clip at the end of their movies, there is no reason that I can't put a clip at the end of my videos. Next time, I'm going to see if I can find some shawarma.